The champagne cork hadn't even stopped rolling across the concrete when my sister Brittany lifted the bottle high and laughed like she had just conquered the world. She stood at the top of the stairs of the gleaming Gulfstream jet, sunlight flashing against its polished body. The cork bounced once, twice, and landed beside my inheritance. A rusted heap hidden under a faded tarp. It looked like something abandoned behind a junkyard fence. I stood there staring at it while the smell of jet fuel filled the air. Then I looked at Tyler, my boyfriend of 3 years. He didn't hesitate, not even for a second. He swung his designer bag onto his shoulder and walked straight past me toward the jet. "Sorry, Ash," he said casually, eyes already locked on the luxury leather seats inside. "You can't fly first class with a pile of scrap metal." The turbine engines roared to life, blasting hot air and dust into my face. I didn't move, I didn't blink. I just watched as the stairs folded up and the jet door sealed shut, and then they left me standing there in the dark. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I'd love to know who's part of this community, and tell me, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? I didn't scream. I didn't run after the runway lights. Like some dramatic scene in a bad romance movie, I simply stood still until the roar of the engine softened, then faded, then disappeared into silence. Dust settled over my boots. My eyes were dry. In fact, my vision had never been clearer. Tyler had walked up those stairs carrying a bag I paid for, wearing shoes I bought, holding a lifestyle I quietly funded. He thought he was stepping into a better future. What he didn't realize was that he had just stepped out of his safety net. I pulled out my phone. The bright screen glowed inside the massive, empty hangar. My fingers moved without hesitation. First, the joint checking account, frozen. Second, the platinum credit card in Tyler's wallet, canceled. Third, the apartment lease signed only in my name. I drafted the notice to vacate right there, standing in the dark. It took exactly 4 minutes to remove every financial thread tying him to me. For minutes, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt efficient, like I had finally closed a tab on a bad investment. Then I turned toward the tarp. It was heavy, stiff from age, smelling like mildew and forgotten summers. I gripped it and pulled hard. Underneath sat the body of a 1967 Mustang. To anyone else, it looked like disaster, rust chewed through the wheel wells. The paint was gone, replaced by dull primer and exposed metal. The interior was stripped bare. It looked dead, but I wasn't anyone else. I was a mechanic. I backed my truck toward the hangar doors and pulled out the winch cable. The steel felt cold and steady in my hands. I didn't look at the empty sky where the jet had disappeared. I crawled under the Mustang. The concrete was freezing, cutting through my coveralls. The smell of oil, rubber, and corrosion filled my lungs. This was my world, not champagne and sky lounges. Gears, torque, leverage. I secured the axle, double-checked the chains, and engaged the winch. The cable tightened with a mechanical groan, and slowly, the Mustang began to move inch by inch. I strapped down the wheels until my knuckles turned white. No hesitation, just muscle memory. I drove out of the airfield without checking the rearview mirror. At the main gate, I stepped out one last time and locked it with a heavy brass padlock. The key rested in my palm. For a moment, I thought about Grandpa Arthur, about the summers I spent in that hangar learning how to rebuild engines, while Brittany used it as a backdrop for social media photos. I tossed the key into the tall grass. Let them call a locksmith when they come back. If they come back. The drive home was silent. My apartment, my real life, was dark when I walked inside. It didn't smell like perfume or luxury candles. It smelled like grease, citrus hand cleaner, and solitude. I sat on the edge of my bed, boots still on. My phone buzzed. Probably Tyler asking why his card got declined, or maybe a picture from the jet with some mocking caption. I didn't check. I turned the phone face down. I had a car to rebuild. And for the first time in 3 years, the silence in the room didn't feel lonely. It felt like freedom. For the next 14 days, I barely saw daylight. The garage became my entire world. Solvent fumes, rust dust, the steady scrape of tools against metal. My hands were permanently stained black. To Brittany, this kind of work would feel like punishment. To me, it felt honest. As I stripped the Mustang down piece by piece, I also stripped down the last decade of my life in my mind. Brittany had always told the family I was the unlucky one, the one who stayed behind. The truth, I was the one keeping everything running. While she traveled the world on Grandpa Arthur's credit card, I stayed in that shop learning how to rebuild carburetors, how to balance inventory, how to manage payroll when Grandpa's hands started shaking too much to hold a wrench. Mine replaced his. Brittany saw him as a walking ATM. I saw him as a partner. One afternoon, I was lying on my back under the dashboard removing rotted liner when my screwdriver hit something soft. Not metal. I reached behind the glove compartment, and felt a thick envelope taped to the firewall. It wasn't dusty. It had been placed there recently. I crawled out and wiped my hands before opening it. Grandpa Arthur's handwriting stared back at me, shaky, careful, written in his final weeks, Ashley. It began, if you're reading this, you didn't sell the car for scrap, you did what you always do, you got to work. I sat down on the cold concrete floor. You're probably angry about the jet. You're wondering why I gave your sister a $24 million aircraft and gave you a rusted shell. I wasn't blind to her greed. I knew exactly who she was. She needs to be seen. She needs something shiny, but planes are not assets, they are liabilities. They burn money every hour they fly. I gave her the jet as a test. I stared at the words. The jet wasn't a reward. It was a burden disguised as a blessing. I gave you the rust. He continued, because you know how to build value. You have patience. This car isn't just a car. Look at the chassis number. And remember, cutting off a rotten limb isn't cruelty, it's how you save the tree. I lowered the letter slowly. For years, I had carried guilt. The feeling that I should have done more for Brittany. That I should have supported her more. That guilt vanished, not faded, deleted. Grandpa hadn't overlooked me. He had trusted me. He had given me a test of character, and without realizing it, I had already passed. I looked at the Mustang differently. Now. It wasn't scrap. It was potential. I picked up my wrench. Winter settled into the garage. My knuckles split open. I wrapped tape around them and kept working. Restoration wasn't glamorous. It was grinding rust until my ears rang. It was wrestling bolts frozen in place since 1967, but while I fought metal on the ground, Brittany broadcast her life in the sky. Every break I took, my phone lit up with her posts. Champagne against cloud-filled windows. Tyler wearing a Rolex that looked too heavy for his wrist. A caption, some of us were born to touch the sky. Others were born to play in the dirt. Hashtag jet life. She tagged me. Of course she did. She didn't just want to win, she wanted an audience. I scrolled through the comments praising her. They saw glamour, I saw jet fuel burning at $5,000 an hour. Then, at 2 a.m., a text from Tyler appeared. Yo, I left my gaming console at the apartment. Ship it to the hotel in Monaco. Pack it properly this time. I know you're bitter, but don't scratch my stuff. I stared at the message. No apology. No concern. Just instructions. In his mind, nothing had changed. I was still the support staff, still the background, still the one handling logistics while he played the hero. Replying wasn't worth the energy. Anger wasn't worth it either. Rage is an energy leak, and I needed every ounce of mine for the car. I stood up and walked over to the corner of the garage where I had piled the box's office things I had packed up weeks ago. I found the box with the console. It was taped shut, labeled with his name. I didn't ship it. I didn't destroy it. Simply moved it to the very back of the storage shelf behind a stack of old tires. He could wait. I looked back at the car. It was stripped down to its skeleton. It looked ugly, vulnerable, and worthless, but under the shop lights, the raw steel gleamed. With potential. Brittany and Tyler were loud. They were shiny. They were screaming for attention from 30,000 feet. But down here in the silence of the garage, I was building something real. I put the phone in do not disturb. I pulled my welding mask back down. The world went dark. And then with a spark, I lit up my own future. It happened on a Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was working on the front inner apron, scrubbing away 50 years of hardened grease and road grime with a wire brush. My arms HAD. The garage was freezing. I was just trying to expose the vehicle identification number to verify the production year. For a parts order, I expected to see a standard factory code. I wiped the metal plane with a rag soaked in solvent. It blinked, then I wiped it again. The stamp didn't look right. It didn't have the standard sequence of a 1967 production model. The letters were hand-stamped, uneven and deep. SHEL by EXP0001. I stopped breathing. In the vintage car world, there are rumors and then there are ghosts. EXP stood for experimental. 001 meant the first. This wasn't just a Mustang. This was the last prototype. Shelby Little Red. A car that history book said was crushed and destroyed decades ago. I didn't take a photo. I didn't post a teaser on Instagram. I walked to the heavy steel doors of the garage, locked all 3 deadbolts, and pulled the blinds. Then I called Mr. Henderson. Henderson was Grandpa Arthur's attorney and a specialist in high-value asset appraisal. He arrived at dawn looking out of place in his Italian suit among the oil stains. He spent 2 hours inspecting the chassis, measuring weld points, and checking the stamping against archival records. He brought in a briefcase. Finally, he took off his reading glasses and looked at me. Ashley, he said, his voice terrifying like him. Do not restore this car with aftermarket parts. Do not drive it. This is the holy grail. As it sits in this condition, it is worth $35 million, fully restored to concourse quality. You are looking at 50, the number hung in the air like smoke, $50 million. More than double what Brittany received. I leaned against the workbench, feeling the cold steel press into my lower back. Grandpa knew, I whispered. He knew it wasn't scrap, Arthur. Knew exactly what he was doing, Henderson said, opening a file folder. Which brings me to your sister. He laid a spreadsheet on the oily workbench. It was a breakdown of the estate's distribution. I need you to understand what your grandfather structured the wealth this way, Henderson said. The world sees Brittany flying on a $24 million jet and thinks she is wealthy. She isn't. That jet is a liability disguised as an asset. He pointed to a column offered numbers. The jet requires $200,000 a month in hangar fees, crew, salaries, insurance, and fuel. The cash inheritance Brittany received. It illegally bound to a trust that can only be used for the jet's operation and maintenance. She can't spend it on herself. She has to spend it to keep the plane flying, essentially. She isn't the owner of that jet. She is its employee. She is working for the machine. I looked at the numbers. It was a financial death spiral. Grandpa Arthur had handed Brittany a golden anchor and watched her tie it around her own ankle. She's burning cash to maintain an image, Henderson continued. Every time she flies, the asset depreciates. Every day this car sits here, it appreciates. She is trapped in a liability loop. You, Ashley, are holding pure equity. It picked up the pen. Henderson had already prepared the paperwork to transfer Thecker's title into an anonymous limit liability company. Does she know? I asked. She will, Henderson replied. When the cash runs out, I signed the documents. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a cold clinical satisfaction. Brittany was posting selfies from 30,000 feet thinking she was looking down on me. In reality, she was falling. She just hadn't hit the ground yet. 6 months. That is exactly how long it takes for a $24 million inheritance to turn into a suffocating mountain of debt when you treat a private jet like an Uber. The social media posts had stopped. The champagne toast had dried up. Mr. Drive. Henderson kept me updated on the forensic accounting of Brittany's downfall. It was brutal math. The cash for operations trust had been drained. The maintenance bills were 60 days past due. The crew had walked off the job in Miami, leaving the Gulfstream grounded on tarmac, accruing parking fees of $2,000 a day. Brittany was insolvent. She was sitting in a dark hotel room, likely staring at a phone that no longer rang with offers for parties, but with demands from creditors. She was droning, and like a drowning person, she flailed for anything that looked like a raft. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the notification came through. It wasn't a text from my sister. It was an automated security alert from the asset protection software Mr. Henderson had installed for the LLC. Unauthorized listing detected. VIN match. I opened the laptop on my workbench. My heart rate didn't spike. I felt the strange icy calm. I clicked the link. There it was, a listing on a second-tier inline auction site. 1967 Ford Mustang, barn find project car, needs work but slid. $15,000. She used old photos. Photos she must have taken on her phone years ago when Grandpa first bought it before the rust had fully taken over. I scrolled down to the attached document section. To list a car, you need proof of ownership. I clicked on the title transfer PDF. The document was a clumsy, desperate forgery. The date was backdated to the day of the funeral, and at the bottom in shaky blue ink was Miss' signature. I stared at the screen. She hadn't just tried to sell a car she didn't own. She had forged a legal document to transfer a titled asset across state lines. She thought she was stealing a beat-up Ford to pay a fuel bill. She had no idea she was attempting to offend a $35 million historical artifact. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This wasn't a civil matter. By signing my name, Brittany had crossed the line into wire fraud and grand larceny. I picked up the phone. Henderson was on speed dial. She listed it. I said, I see it. Henderson replied, his voice crisp. I am looking at the transfer document now. The signature is a clear forgery, Ashley. I need you to understand what happens next. If we delete this, there is no going back. This is a felony. I looked at the gleaming silver body of the Shelby Little Red, sitting in my garage. It was perfect. It was honest. It had survived decades of neglect to finally shine. Brittany had been given everything: wealth, status, the easy path, and she had destroyed it all in half a year. No, she wanted to destroy my work, too. She made her choice. I said, file it. It hung up. I didn't feel guilty. I felt like a judge who had just heard the final piece of evidence. The verdict was in the auction house in Terry smelled off old money, leather, and quiet power. In the center of the rotating podium sat Shelby Little Red. It no longer looked like a rust bucket. It was a masterpiece of restored engineering. Gleaming in cardinal red, its chrome reflecting the faces of billionaire shouldering numbered paddles. The bidding had already passed $20 million. I stood in the wings wearing a tailored black suit. That cost more than the truck used to tow the car home. Mr. Henderson stood beside me. Checking his watch. "They're here," he said softly. It turned toward the velvet ropes at the entrance. There was a commotion. Security guards were trying to block two people. But Brittany's screeching voice cut through the polite murmur of their room. "That is my family's property. Get your hands off me. I need to speak to Miss Sister." Brittany and Tyler burst into the main hall. The visual contrast was brutal. Brittany, who used to look like a walking magazine cover, looked unraveled. Her hair was messy. Her designer coat was wrinkled. And there was a desperation in her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. Tyler trailed behind her, looking smaller than he had ever seen him. They spotted me and sprinted across the floor, ignoring the gasps of the attendees. "Ashley," Brittany panted, grabbing my arm. Her grip was clammy. "Stop the auction. You can't sell it. That car belonged to Grandpa Arthur. It's family property. We have to split proceeds. We're sisters, Ash. You can cut me out." Tyler stepped up, putting on his best smile, though his eyes darted nervously around the room. "Babe, look, we messed up the jet. It's complicated, but we can fix this. We're a team, right? 30 million split 3 ways is plenty for everyone." I looked Adler. Then I looked at Brittany. I didn't pull my arm away. I didn't yell. I just signaled Mr. Henderson. He stepped forward and placed a thick manila folder into my hand. "There is nothing to split," I said, my voice calm out to freeze water. Brittany's eyes widened. "Don't be greedy, Ashley. Mom and Dad would want." "Mom and Dad aren't there," I interrupted. "And neither is title to this car. It belongs to Thelk." I handed her the folder. She opened it, her hands shaking. "What is this?" she whispered. "That," I said, pointing to the top document, "is a copy of the federal lawsuit filed this morning for wire fraud, forgery, and attempted grand larceny regarding your fraudulent auction listing. And the skin document is a restraining order." Tyler backed away, his smile vanishing. "Fraud, ho, Ashley. I didn't sign anything. That was all her." Brittany looked at him, betrayed, then back at him. Tears began to well up. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of terror. "Ashley, please, they'll put me in jail. I'm broke. The jet is impounded. I have nothing." I leaned in close soon as she could hear me. "You wanted Toffley." "Brittany," I said, "now you crash." I nodded to the security team. 2 large men in dark suits stepped in, gripping Brittany and Tyler by the elbows as they were dragged backward toward the exit, screaming and pleading. The auctioneer's gavel slammed down on the podium with a sound like a gunshot. "Sold." The auctioneer boomed. "For $35 million. The room erupted in applause. I didn't look at the door. I looked at Thacker. The rust was gone. And so was theirs in my family tree. The legal cleanup took 3 months. It was quieter than the auction. There were no cameras when the judge sentenced Brittany to 5 years of probation and ordered full restitution for the defrauded auction fees. Since she had 0 assets left, the jet having been repossessed by the bank to cover the outstanding hanger liens, she was assigned court-mandated community service. The last I heard, she was picking up trash along the highway, wearing an orange vest that clashed horribly with the remnants of her old life. As for Tyler, he vanished. I blocked his number, his email, and his social media. I didn't need to know where he went. He was a bad investment. I had finally written off the books. $35 million is a lot of money. It is that kind of money that ruins people who weren't ready for it. But Grandpa Arthur hadn't just left me a car, he had left me a curriculum. He had taught me that wealth isn't what you spend, it is what you build. I didn't buy a penthouse. I didn't buy a yacht. I bought the hangar. I hired a crew to clear out the weed sand, repaint the steel beams. I installed state-of-the-art lifts and climate control. Above the main bay doors, it hung a simple sign, "The Arthur Vintage Restoration Academy." I wasn't just fixing cars anymore, I was fixing fine industry. I set up a scholarship fund for kids who, like me, preferred Grisato glitter. Kids who knew how to work with their hands but just needed a chance to get their foot in the door. Today, the shop is full. The air smells of welding, ozone, and fresh coffee. I have 10 students restoring a fleet of 1950s trucks. I walk the floor, not as an invisible employee, but as the owner. The noise here isn't chaotic. It is the symphony of productivity. I still drive me old truck. It has 200,000 miles on it and the transmission sticks in second gear sometimes, but I love it. It gets me where I need to go, sometimes when shop is quiet at night. I think about the choice Grandpa gave us. Brittany chose the thing that shines for 3 seconds. She wanted the flash, instant gratification, the view from 30,000 feet. I chose the thing that looks like rust but lasts for 3 generations. I chose the work. Value isn't what you show off on Instagram. It isn't the champagne or the private jet, true. Value is what you build when no one is watching. It is the patience to sand down the rough edges until you find the silver underneath. Brittany wanted Toffley, I wanted to drive. And the funny thing about driving is that you actually legit to see the world you are passing through. You get to feel the road, and most importantly, you are the one holding the wheel. If you believe hard work eventually pays off, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you have chosen the jet or Thacker? I will be reading your answers.